Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me well? David?
Everybody hear me? Okay, good.
That is test 1, test 2, test 3. That's the thing. All right, first of all, thank you very much for coming and attending the session. We're very excited and happy to be here, both RedHat and Accenture. Let me start with a couple of questions for you guys so you can wake up a little bit and stop messing with mobiles and phones and all the stuff. I know it's important, but how many of you before this session thought that Accenture was doing Internet of Things? Can you raise your hand? Yeah, almost a half, right? How many of you thought that RedHat was doing IoT? Hey, more than I was expecting, right?
Same half.
Same half. So let me tell you a brief story about, because most of the times when I visit my customers and partners, and they keep asking me, come on guys, are you doing IoT, really? You, RedHat, you don't have a platform, you don't have a solution? What are you doing, right? The story and what RedHat brings into the table when we talk about IoT is how we help customers and partners like Accenture collecting all the data that is being produced at the field, transform that data and making it flowing from the field to the data center or the cloud, and taking actions, operational and tactical actions, and feeding your analytics to better respond to what the business is demanding. This is what RedHat brings into the table, right? So basically what RedHat does is providing a foundation, a technology foundation for the IoT, right? In a scalable, flexible, secure way. You know that we're very well known and respected in the community, IT community, about security, right? Making things be really consumable at an enterprise level, driving the innovation happening in open source communities to enterprise-grade platforms and solutions that you guys consume, right? That is what RedHat does, and that is what we did with Accenture. David will talk more about how we collaborated together into creating their Connected Platform as a Service IoT platform. It's a super beautiful use case. I'm very happy that David is here to bring us the insight. He's the guest star. I'm only doing the intro for him. But I wanted to remark what RedHat, the mission that we do, right? You'll hear things like openness as a key factor for doing these things. You'll hear things of open standard, open architecture. You'll hear about how we can put together things, getting that innovation happening in the community. You know, probably all of you, the Eclipse umbrella and everything that is happening in IoT in Eclipse. We're putting engineering efforts in developing this story in several of the open source projects that you can see there, and how we transition that innovation to the enterprise, right? We call the reference architecture, the model. We're still creating and innovating together with folks like Accenture and trying to define how we can bring the data center capabilities and feature closer to the edge, closer to the device, so we can process that data, transform, act upon, store in a secure way, flexible, and take decisions that they used to happen only in the data center, and now we kind of think that more and more of those automatic actions and intelligence is going to happen in the back end of a retail store, in a warehouse, in a manufacturing facility, in the back of a hospital, if you're doing anything e-health related. David will talk about several use cases, transportation, logistics. So RedHat provides solutions and technologies with a proven track that we've been doing this for a lot of years with partners like Accenture, and it's technology that it works, it is there, and I would say that we've been doing that for a lot of years, right? So the whole thing about the partner ecosystem, and David will remark this message, it's a very powerful message, right? We recognize that we're not alone in the IT world, far the opposite. We are only one piece, about that. And the whole great thing that is happening, if you attended the keynote from Jim, is about how we participate, how we collaborate all together, several organizations and companies like Accenture, RedHat, and some others in bringing end-to-end solutions where people like Accenture can add to the table on top of the technology that RedHat provides, their expertise, background, domain-specific vertical knowledge, and that is what really solves business problems for customers and partners. So this is what we do. This is what RedHat does, right? And I would like to thank you and introduce David Noon. He is the responsible for the application and how they run the application in production. You can introduce yourself, sure. Right? But I wanted to ask you guys to give a warm applause. We are very thrilled and happy that Accenture agreed very kindly to be here. So David, floor is all yours. Thank you very much, and thank you.
Thanks. Whoops. Let me switch this out. All right, so just by way of introduction, I'm in the Accenture Digital Mobility Organization, and I work specifically on the, as it comes up, yeah, the platform part of our market with regard to the IoT space. And what we're really doing is, about 2 years ago, Accenture realized that we had multiple different business units, one in mobility, one in analytics, one in marketing interactive. And what we're finding from our clients is that as clients wanted an IoT-based solution, they also wanted the analytics. Why? Because they needed to understand how to make decisions based on that data that's coming off of that. And so about 2 years ago, Accenture reorganized itself around digital. And that's probably the largest growth engine for us within the industry. And what I'd like to represent to you, we see IoT as that growth engine in the industry, not only for ourselves, but as David had mentioned, for our larger ecosystem and partners. And I don't want to undersell or underplay the power of the ecosystem. We're not going to solve all of this. We need a number of technology and partners within that ecosystem. And our view of it is, given our heritage, is bringing that solution on an end-to-end basis to our customer as a managed service. And so that's what we want to talk about, is give you our perspective on IoT, on platforms, and why platforms truly are needed to enable that managed service. So what I want to do is just give you an external market view of platforms, then talk about our view of how we approach the IoT market space, and then more specifically dive into the detail about our platform and why it's so important. And to make it real also, talk about the use cases and frankly open it up to a conversation about, how did we approach designing those solutions for our clients? What value did it have for them in terms of their business outcomes as well? So please feel free to ask questions along the way. Just a couple observations. And I know we're at a developer conference, a technology conference, but platforms to us is not a technology decision. It's a business decision. Because in the IoT space, what we're focusing on is what is the outcome. Every one of our IoT conversations with our clients starts with what is the outcome, what is the problem that they're trying to solve. And from that, we then bring together different components leveraged by our platform, not only internal components, but other partner components to be able to enable that end-to-end solution. And so while we think that 80%, just the 80-20 rule, is while we believe that the IoT space has the need for multiple different capabilities, we tailor those to a vertical specific solution in an industry and specific to that client. And what that really needs is a very flexible environment to be able to provide that solution and a flexible platform for it. So an interesting factoid, we're actually tracking the number of platforms that are out there. 2 observations. At last count, there's over 100 different platforms that different companies are offering in the industry. And what's really interesting about it is they're not from technology-based companies necessarily either. Some companies in the manufacturing space are creating their own platform. And what they're finding or trying to find out is how do they solve that business problem. It's not an IT problem, it's an operations technology challenge. How do we increase the efficiency of our operations, leveraging the information from sensors and actuators and devices, but then make next best action business decisions based off of that. So it's interesting. I started out in the telco industry. I don't know if people remember when AT&T was split up, but at one count there were 1,200 CLECs out there in the industry, and I would challenge anybody in this room to name 5. And so what we're interested in is, as the industry transforms, we're really at the beginning of this. People are trying to solve the problem, and they don't quite get all the components. Is the industry going to sustain itself with regard to 100 different platform providers out there? I don't know, but I would make the offer in terms of relative market share. That's going to be a challenge to sustain that much. So that's one observation. The other is the industry boundaries are blurring. I'll give you a use case. So I'm going to pepper the discussion with actually real live use cases. So for instance, what we're seeing is traditional industry silos are breaking down. Take, for instance, an example of connected home. You could offer a service with regard to connected home in terms of energy management services, which companies are doing, security services, which are completely separate vendors out there. We'll make the argument that if you have a platform to enable the provisioning of a service, a gateway, a device, sensors, then there's very little incremental investment to then add new services onto that. And so, for example, if you bring those services together, the ability to offer flexible service creation as well is something that we feel the industry needs. But you need a platform to enable that. And then lastly, in terms of the bottom left-hand side, our view is, and this is both technology and business, is that the industry is going to expose the feature functionality via a set of APIs. It's almost cliche to say that now, but if you look at where the use cases that are being adopted in the marketplace, underlying the technology strategy is a set of APIs that have been exposed to bring a solution together on an end-to-end basis. I'm not going to drain this slide, but our marketing department said, you got to put that in, Dave. So your bet whether or not there's 20 billion or 40 billion devices out there, nonetheless, it's a big market. And our view is, in order to bring that all together, you need to have somebody pull the pieces of that together. The next piece of this is interesting as well, because it's showing the change in the structure of the industry, is that what's enabling IoT is almost the Moore's Law effect within the device side of the business. Is as sensors and actuators become less expensive, you're enabling different solutions. But I would challenge also, one of the things that we're observing is, as you put millions and millions of sensors out there in the marketplace, so think about it, in an oil field, if you put, in some oil pads, you might have up to 50 to 100 sensors in one oil pad. To bring all that information back, that requires a network to do that. That's expensive. And so what we're looking at is different partners that provide gateways and other edge-based analytics to drive the decision-making and the filtering of that information out locally to only send the most appropriate information back. Because even though you can send all that information back, that's going to make the cost of that solution prohibitive. And so some of the pieces that we're trying to solve with our clients is they're not going to be able to move forward with a business case if their network connectivity charges are high. So that's where technology providers, we could talk about it a little bit later, but RedHat and Eurotech made an announcement as of yesterday, keep me honest here, but where they're pushing the logic and the business decisions out to the edge on the Eurotech gateway devices, and the ability to provide more information processing to the edge to then only bring back the most appropriate business information back to the data center or the central management system. So these are the things that are occurring in the industry, but by far, we have not solved that problem. And what I'm alluding to really is we can provide value to that, but it's an ecosystem of partnerships that provide that end-to-end system. For example, with the carrier costs, working with our telco providers in partnership with them to do that. What's interesting about this is again, it's a market-facing view, but for us, from a practical and operational perspective, the statistic on the right-hand side is most appropriate to us. While we feel like we're at the beginning of the market, people are making decisions now about the path they want to take going forward. So what we've done is we've taken the approach in the marketplace, as opposed to how the IT outsourcing market evolved over the last 10 or 15 years, where you had huge $100 million, multi-million dollar deals. What we're finding is our clients don't know what they want to do sometimes, but they know they have to do something. So we've created proof of concepts and trials, very low budget, low cost entry, to be able to solve and prototype those use cases for them. And actually for us, adopted an agile methodology to be able to prototype, to iterate those prototypes to try to address what is it that they really need at that moment in time to be able to justify moving forward with their use case and solutions. So the other aspect of it, so that's kind of the external marketplace, our view of IoT and some of the work that's going on in the broader market with regard to platforms. What we've done internally, and I'd be interested to hear your feedback after the session, is that we've organized our digital business across 5 towers, market-facing towers, to identify market spaces. This is actually different than the way the rest of the company was organized across our operating groups. And the reason why we did this is, I'm going to stay with the connected spaces example with regard to connected home. For instance, with connected spaces, that can span multiple different market segments in terms of the actual use case that you're promoting. It could be, for instance, with connected home. It could be working with companies like Intel to identify what kind of gateway goes into the home. It could include working with companies like AT&T, Verizon, or Jasper with regard to the network connectivity. It could include other applications vendors in the products area to say, how do we bring together both security, energy management. Even we were talking to an insurance company a couple months ago about connected home, very large insurance company in the US, and they said, what if we put a sensor on a water heater and sense when there's a leak? Because their claims, I mean, this actually happened to me. We were away on vacation and the pipe broke. That is a very expensive claim to pay when you can just put maybe a $5 sensor on a water heater to sense once it's broken, and then potentially put an actuator on the water meter to turn it off remotely by the insurance company. Now that's interesting. Think about it. That's a very simple use case, but think about the ecosystem of companies that you'd have to include to be able to solve that problem. Between the equipment, a field services dispatch type company, the insurance company, the claims, it's a much different market in terms of the IoT use cases that we are seeing from a traditional IT technology point of view. And so what we've done is basically created these 5 different industry segments, and within those teams had people identify what are the use cases and go validate those with clients to do proof of concepts, pilots, and try to drive demand for those. And then underneath that, we've really created, this is where the platform comes in terms of the CPaaS platform. Across the verticals, it's really what's driving our businesses are the development of the vertical applications, but it's platform enabled. And so if you think about the 80-20 rule, the platform is really the plumbing underneath that enables the use cases, right? And so it's a combination of the infrastructure, the operation services, or what I would call the managed services, the people, processes, and tools, the platform being the tool, and then the software or technology stack in concert with working with companies like RedHat to put all that together. The other element of this is that historically, people were deploying dedicated data centers for these types of solutions. And what we've done is said the economics of that just aren't going to work in the IoT space. So what we've done is taken our platform and deployed it on the cloud. We've already put it natively on AWS and Microsoft Azure, and enable that solution for people to be able to lower the cost point, minimize the barrier of entry in terms of the cost to be able to deploy that. And then we've done it across the stack, not only the devices, but also the networks, the applications, to be able to bring it all together. And then I've touched on this a little bit. What we've really done is, from a platform perspective, is disintermediated the business logic. And I'm going to show you kind of a high-level architecture slide in a second, but I just want to introduce this one first to say we really need to disintermediate between the devices, the cloud platform infrastructure, the platform that we have, and then the vertical applications that sit on top of that. And in short, what makes it more deployable from a market perspective is on the platform we've exposed all the business logic and the industry logic via a set of RESTful APIs. That's the only way to access that. And what it does is it really provides that hardened platform approach, but enables us to work with partners to expose those APIs. So the idea is over time, we're not the ones that necessarily have to develop that vertical application. As other companies have done, they've opened up their environments via a set of APIs and enabled other people to come in and develop solutions. We're doing that internally with our delivery and client teams, but over time, that strategy, what we would do is we promote that into the open ecosystem and enable others, such as yourselves, have access to that platform and develop the applications in concert with our solutions approach and our service approach and broaden that ecosystem. Because the reality is we've got probably over 120 use cases right now that we're looking at. And I know Accenture's a big company, but we just don't have the scale nor sometimes the depth of knowledge in one specific area. That's why we want to open it up, because there's a number of applications providers and other people in the industry that in concert with us, we could work to develop that end-to-end service. And before I get into the details of the platform, what we're really talking about here is transforming three different areas. The devices more to connected devices, and not just connecting them, but pushing the service logic out to the gateways or the device, the edge of the network to be able to drive business decisions locally. The other piece of it is driving the data more towards industry information. We were talking last night about how much data do you think we would have when we start putting sensors in oil fields or manufacturing facilities. It's just an unbelievable amount of information that then people need to process and make decisions off of. And so what we're doing is really changing that by introducing analytics and integrating with our analytics team to be able to not only take the data, but also analyze it and push it out to the edge. Some of the key concepts too that I think are important. From a standards perspective, we talked about open source, but also we're a key member of the IoT consortium to make sure that as the industry adopts that as a standard, we're also following in suit with that. The other piece of this that I think that I've mentioned already are the exposure of the APIs, but also from a security perspective, we're working with Intel in terms of a joint initiative to leverage the investment they're making. They've made over, this public information, they've made over $1 billion in investments in the IoT space. They bought McAfee, they bought Wind River in terms of security and embedded OS in devices, and we want to take advantage of that and work with them, because they're going to bring that capability, for instance, from a security standpoint to the table as well. So let me talk about just the CPaaS high-level architecture. What I talked about before is really disintermediating the platform. And the bottom level, we've got the devices and network enablers. What we've done is we've already pre-certified and pre-integrated with things like SMS gateways, Jasper, who probably is connected to almost every tier 1 mobile operator in the world, and identified what are the things that we need to do to enable connectivity out through different connections. For instance, with one of our clients, we even had to manage a satellite connection because they're heavy equipment manufacturer in remote construction sites. So they asked us to connect through a satellite vendor and work that angle as well. If you move up the stack, then the data and the analytics piece is how do you define the ingestion of the data and connect that out to analytics engines that we've integrated with as well. And then moving up the stack in terms of the industry and the business enablers. Industry enablers are things like device management, application management and configuration, more along the ITIL managed services model. And then the business services are more specific to provisioning a client, provisioning a service, provisioning devices. Again, the idea is This is the plumbing. This is taking care of 80% of what we believe would be the common feature functionality required to enable an IoT solution, so that the focus of the industry and even our internal teams can be focusing on developing the value add in terms of the application level and not worrying about all the plumbing, if you will, that's required really commonly across many different IoT solutions. And then sitting on top of that are the vertical applications. And then bookending that is really the operations. Again, as you'd expect, we adopt ITIL methodology with regard to our operation service delivery model and service assurance as well. And then on the right-hand side, we've got a developer portal and a developer ecosystem that currently we're working internally with, the vision is to expand that and open that up to a broader application development community. And I turned mine off. I always do that. But the other piece of it is, again, we don't want to dictate to the community nor to our partners how we do this. So think of CPaaS as the application that we can then deploy in the cloud. We've already pre-certified it on AWS I/O services as well as with Microsoft as well. What's interesting though in terms of if you think about where the industry is going, one might ask, AWS and Microsoft are also moving up the value chain. How do we leverage their IoT services that they've most recently announced? And so the idea is that since we've adopted the OSGI framework with regard to the modularity of the platform, we can shift that design depending on either the partner that we're working with or the client, the client-specific needs. So as we become aware of new services like Microsoft IoT services, we can plug and play those capabilities with the solution as opposed to not being able to leverage the work and the value add that they're bringing to the table. And then as the market evolves, we'll clearly adopt additional models and or work with our clients' infrastructure as well. Now let me start evolving towards where we sit with RedHat and where they sit in the stack as well. Again, not to get into too much detail, but on the left-hand side is really the value chain in terms of the delivery model that we use and the functionality that we provide as part of the end-to-end solution. And you can kind of see where different partners fit into that stack. Like I said before, we need a connectivity model. Are we going to go do that? No, that's why we integrated with Jasper. Again, the value to that was we work with global Fortune 500 companies. We need to connect our solution to multiple different carriers throughout the world. That was a value add with regard to connecting with Jasper. Similarly with Intel, while we have a security practice internally, Intel's acquisition of McAfee and Wind River with regard to embedded software and security, that's a huge value add to the industry. They're making a large bet to play in the IoT space, and we wanted to leverage that capability as well. So we're working with Intel in that space. Like I already talked about, we're working with Amazon and Microsoft. Apogee is, again, another technology provider. They're very strong, one of the market leaders in API management and development. So that when I talked earlier about the API exposure at the northbound side of the platform, that's who we're using for exposing APIs, creation and service exposure of those APIs. Again, if there's a vendor or a technology out there that we can work with, that's clearly what we're going to do. And then lastly, with respect to RedHat, to be able to enable the communication, the orchestration, integration, and routing of all the events within the platform, that's where RedHat brings tremendous value to us in terms of using the RedHat JBoss middleware to be able to enable that capability across our platform that we've created. And that's what I'll spend a few minutes here talking about. So more specifically, where RedHat sits in the platform is really, it's a core asset within the platform itself, and it provides predominantly the two products that we're using is JBoss Fuse and the AMQ messaging system. And again, if you think about it, what provides the modularity and the flexibility to address every one of those new use cases is the design of the architecture in terms of making it a node-based architecture to be able to pull in and out different components against a set of events and rules prescribed by that vertical application. And by leveraging JBoss Fuse and the messaging system, AMQ, it allows us to be able to manage that across an end-to-end solution. Let me pause there, just any, okay.
I think that's perfect.
The other piece that I didn't mention, just from the standpoint of, people talk about enterprise service bus and microservices. We kind of adopt the best of both philosophies. And in a sense, when we redesign the platform, every capability or feature we've exposed as a microservice and exposed through an API engine, the Apigee API engine, as a capability that can be leveraged by the application developer. This provides tremendous value to us, and I'm going to give you a use case in a second, so I'll circle back to it. But what it does is the traditional model is we needed our asset development team to sit down with a client. We design a specific solution for that client that was specific to that client and that client only, and deploy that as a one-time basis. In an example that I'm going to talk about in a second, by having that API layer, what we were able to do was expose or create an instance of our platform, exposing the APIs to that client development team, and they were the ones that actually developed a vertical application specific to, in the case of this, it was a connected ship opportunity. And they were able to develop that all on their own. Now, it was all internal to Accenture, but the value of that is it validated the concept that by exposing, and the industry is going this direction as well, by exposing the APIs to an application developer, they don't have to worry about the plumbing. They focus on what their core expertise is. In this case, it was the shipping industry. They created that prototype, put it in front of a client in 6 weeks, and that enabled us to move forward with an opportunity.
Dave, let me jump in very quickly to remark something about the collaboration that we're doing together in this core asset and foundation of their platform, right? If you think how IoT is evolving so fast and so rapid and quickly, it is not only that they're creating new standards there. You're connecting to more and more different systems of more and more nature. So the kind of play that guys like Accenture and us bring to the table is that they know the domain-specific thing that is going on. So they are able to create those applications, those connectors to integrate with different systems, but they have to keep that, maintain that, evolve that in the future, right? So the kind of open collaboration and participation that we do together is in the open source way. We work with them, they develop, or we develop jointly that connector or driver, or you call it whatever you feel like, and then you get that connector that is next version out of the box, not only for Accenture, but for all the community and ecosystem of different partners and customers, and you get adding more and more connectors to get and integrate with more and more different field devices, gateways, et cetera, et cetera. That is a very powerful message because they can focus and concentrate on what they do best. That is the vertical expertise. And what we do for them is out of the box, next version, instead of 200 connectors to connect to almost everybody, then you have 215 that they are coming through the partnership with them and with other partners, right? There is where the collaboration and participation is happening, and we all are getting the value from there, right?
Exactly. So just to wrap this up, and then I actually want to give you some use cases so that you can kind of take the concept and see how we've actually implemented it in terms of making it real to see that the IoT market is evolving and growing. What's interesting is what we're finding, at least initially in the IoT space, is a lot of people look at it as, well, we need to increase our operational efficiency. And that is a lot of what we're focusing on and our clients are focusing on right now. But what's interesting is as we get into some engagements with clients, what they're finding out also is just unconventional revenue sources. So for instance, with one client, we put wireless modules on heavy construction equipment in order to reduce their warranty repair costs. That was the business problem they were trying to solve. But what they found was they were able to provide that information to the dealer network, and the dealers were able to upsell service maintenance contracts. And so it increased their relationship as a manufacturer with their dealer network, but it also allowed their dealers to get increased revenue as well by selling service maintenance contracts that they weren't able to before. That was not in the original business case, nor did we think about it, nor did the client think about it. But these are the kinds of things, is as you get down these use cases, you'll start discovering and finding new ways that they may be able to transform their business as well. So let me just spend the next few minutes talking about a couple different business cases to kind of make it real for you. So in one case, and many of these use cases are going to be more on the manufacturing product side. What was interesting in the mining example is they had multiple different systems that were siloed, and none of the information was really available to the managers in the field in terms of where do they deploy their assets that are underutilized. And so what we're able to do is put devices on the equipment, but also integrate it into their work order and supply chain system so that they could more optimally schedule the amount of, for instance, in this case, the amount of soil that was coming out of the mine with the trucks that needed to take that and ship it out. And so very, very basic use case, but it had tremendous efficiency, operational efficiency improvement in terms of how they would do that, just by putting sensors on that and bringing that data back to their central operations center. The other piece is, and I'm going to give you two more, is one is connected asset operations. So interesting aside, when we started with this project with a client, I actually started with AT&T. I worked with service development and worked with the labs. So a big thing in the telco industry, right, is 5 nines reliability. That's kind of the standard, right? In the manufacturing setting, when they retool a plant, they need to bring a number of people, typically contractors, a number of people to come in and retool that plant. So it's a combination of people, work orders, and assets that they're bringing in. What do you think the efficiency that they use to measure? They call it time on tools, meaning personnel that are physically working the retooling of the plant on the equipment. What do you think the efficiency would be in that kind of an environment? It was 40%. And to me, that kind of shocked me, and it says, well, wait a minute. You know, I came at it from a completely different background in terms of the telco model. But what it really says is matching, when we dissected the problem, they had 3 different systems: management of their personnel and where to send them, management of their work orders in terms of what needed to be done that day, and then management of the assets. All 3 of those systems were separate and didn't really operate together in a cohesive fashion. So by putting the sensors on the equipment, actually putting sensors on the people in terms of tracking where they were on the manufacturing plant floor, and matching that information to the work orders, it tremendously increases the efficiency of how they retool a plant. And they can measure the amount of dollars, in this case, it was millions of dollars per day in terms of how much they were spending to retool that plant. So the more quickly they retool a plant and get it back up online, the more efficient they're going to have in terms of saving that project. So it was a very interesting project, given at least my background coming from the telco space. And then 2 more. This is actually a project that we're working with Metro de Madrid in Spain. What they want to do is they really want to create basically a digital station where they can integrate the management of the trains with the management of the people coming in and out of the train station and offer additional applications on top of that. And so right now what we're doing is working through a design phase with them to say how can they create that digital station of the future by optimizing that whole experience. And you can kind of see over the last year or 2 some of the challenges that the rail operators have had just from a safety perspective, and that was one of the reasons why we're working with them to figure out how do you optimally manage all the different assets. And then lastly, smart chip. This was Hyundai. So again, kind of a technology or a part of the market where you wouldn't necessarily think, well, this is a great opportunity for IoT. What was interesting about working with Hyundai is their port operations and their actually operations of their ships, the equipment, the machinery, the manifest, from their standpoint, was not fully integrated together. So just a simple use case. By knowing where the ship was in terms of the port and linking when that ship was going to be allowed to dock and either load or unload their equipment, they were able to say, well, this ship's going to, the rate at which it's going, it's going to it may arrive too early, so it's going to have to sit there and run idle. Well, what happens is when they're doing that, they're burning fuel. So what we've done is created an application and say, how do you optimize the time at which they come into port to reduce or really optimize the fuel consumptions on the ship. The other aspect of that is they wanted to monitor the ship remotely before it got to the port so that they had a team to basically be prepared to perform any preventive maintenance. And so what we've done is we put sensors on the ship to connect to all the engine and machinery within the ship to provide connectivity back real time to the port operations center so that by the time that ship actually gets there and unloads, there's a team ready to perform all that operations maintenance so that by the time the ship is loaded back up, it's gone and it's not held up by some type of maintenance and repair. So that was a very unique circumstance, but you can think about it in terms of across the whole shipping industry, how effective that would be in terms of monitoring the shipping, the machinery, and everything else. So that's a summary of just the operational use cases. Kind of bring it back up. You know, we talked about the platform, where we see IoT in the market, how we're working to compete in the IoT space, and then some of the examples that we've got in terms of use cases. I appreciate you taking the time to come and listen. If you have any questions, we'll take them. And any parting thoughts?
I think that's perfect. I really love the use cases, especially the Madrid one, because I'm from Spain. So all my family, when they go there, they're going to experience these new digital stations. So that's kind of cool, right? Questions, please, from the audience? No questions?
Not a question, but a reminder, we have an IoT partner showcase in the partner, and we'll be having different partner presentations on the again by date and schedules in the back.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. That's all good. We're going to run several IoT specific with Accenture and other partners along these couple of days. They are all very interesting, so we really invite you to be there. And if you don't have any questions, we'll be happy to take that offline if you're shy or something. If not, please enjoy RedHat Summit, get a chance to talk and collaborate, participate, have discussions with your peers, even your competitors or co-competitors, right? And we'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.